I stood frozen in the hallway of my own penthouse, fingers pressed to the cool painted wall, while my husband's laughter rolled out from the living room. The stem of the champagne flute in my other hand dug into my palm, suddenly too heavy to hold. Seriously, man, how do you even cope? Oliver Grant's voice carried cleanly through the open doorway. My wife blows more on handbags than your girl makes in 6 months. More laughter, male voices overlapping in easy agreement. They were Caleb's colleagues, his friends, the men he'd invited over to celebrate our 5th wedding anniversary. I'd been in the kitchen lining up dessert plates when their conversation drifted into dangerous territory. "It's really not that bad," Caleb said, but there was amusement in his tone, not defense. "Naomi's happy with her little teaching job. She loves those kids." "Little teaching job," someone repeated in a mocking drawl. "Couldn't be me. My girlfriend almost matches my salary. You need a partner who actually pulls their weight." "Well, technically, Naomi contributes," Caleb added, and I could hear the grin in his voice. "She brings in, what, 39,000 a year before taxes?" The room erupted. My chest squeezed so tight it hurt. "Be honest with us, Caleb," another voice pushed. This one belonged to Langford, his boss. "Does it ever get to you having to carry everything financially?" The quiet that followed couldn't have lasted more than 3 seconds. 3 seconds that split my whole life open. "Honestly," Caleb said at last, his voice dropping into something more serious, more real. "Yeah, sometimes it does. I mean, I love her. But there are days I think about what life would be like with someone more ambitious, someone on my level." The flute slid from my fingers before I realized I'd let go. It hit the hardwood with a sharp crack, exploding into glittering shards. Champagne splashed across the floor, bubbles fizzing as they crawled into the seams of the wood, like my humiliation was seeping down into the bones of this place. Silence swallowed the laughter in the living room. For a second, nobody breathed. I didn't move. I didn't rush to say, "Oops." I didn't scramble for paper towels or apologize for being clumsy. I had done enough cleaning up in this marriage, of messes, of moments, of Caleb himself. I just stared at the puddles spreading across the floor. "Naomi," his voice floated toward me, chair legs scraped. "Naomi, babe?" Footsteps approached, then he filled the doorway to the hall. Caleb looked like the walking definition of success in his tailored navy suit. His dark hair perfectly styled, his tie just loose enough to seem relaxed but still intentional. His watch caught the light. The cufflinks I'd given him for our 3rd anniversary winked on his sleeves. His face was arranged in concern, neat and practiced, the way he wore his empathetic expression in front of clients. His eyes, though, were flickering fast, calculating, measuring how bad this might be for him. "Babe, you okay?" he asked. I turned my head and really looked at him. This man believed he carried me, believed he funded this life, believed the marble entryway, the soaring ceilings, the city skyline behind him were proof of his hustle. And he had no idea. No idea that the penthouse he bragged about closing on just before the market jumped had never had his name on any deed. No idea that the art hanging behind his head was bought from galleries that sent invoices directly to my family's attorney. No idea that the woman he'd just reduced to a punchline in front of his friends could buy everyone in that room twice and still have enough left to fund a scholarship program. "I'm fine," I heard myself say. My voice sounded like it was coming from somewhere else, distant and flat. "I think I'll go to bed. Naomi, it's only 9:30. He gave a nervous little laugh and glanced back over his shoulder toward the living room. "It's our anniversary party. Our anniversary party. Our 5 years of vows and promises and supposed partnership, reduced to background noise behind a conversation about how my salary was an embarrassment. I have parent-teacher conferences tomorrow," I said, forcing a small, polite smile. "You know how it is with my little teaching job." Something flickered in his eyes then. Guilt, maybe, or just annoyance that I'd overheard the part he never meant me to hear. "Naomi, enjoy your evening," I cut in, stepping around the shattered glass. "Caleb," I walked past him, past the living room where conversations had suddenly gone just a little too quiet, past the men who couldn't quite meet my gaze. Their wives weren't invited tonight. This was just the guys, he'd said. "Work people. It'll be boring for you." Apparently, I was entertainment enough. In the master bedroom, I closed the door and turned the lock. The soft click was louder than all their laughter had been a moment ago. Our bedroom. Except the truth settled over me like a weighted blanket. It had never been ours. The bed, the nightstands, the wall of windows framing the glittering skyline. Everything in this room had been chosen, designed, paid for by me. Long before there was a Caleb and Naomi monogram on our towels, there had just been my name on all the paperwork. I crossed to the glass and pressed my palm against it, the night-cooled surface grounding me. Somewhere down there, in that maze of streetlights and cars, there were couples who were honest with each other. Women who didn't have to hide half their identity to be loved. Men who didn't need to step on their partners to feel tall. My phone buzzed on the nightstand. I didn't have to look to know which notification it was. Reminding meeting confirmed, Tuesday 7 a.m., attorney Lisa Harper. I'd scheduled it 2 days ago after I found the first red flags on Caleb's statement. Hotel charges at a boutique place across town I'd never stayed. A wine bar I'd heard of but never visited. A jewelry boutique receipt from a store I adored. But for a necklace I had definitely never received. Back then, I'd clung to reasonable doubt, fingers dug into it like a life raft. Maybe he was planning a surprise. Maybe it was a client. Maybe it was a mistake. Tonight, there were no maybes left. He didn't respect me. Not my work, not my contribution, not my boundaries. He stayed because he thought I needed him to afford this life, that he was the one keeping the wall standing. He had no idea that if he vanished tomorrow, the only thing that would change in this penthouse would be how much quieter it felt. My phone buzzed again. This time, it was the building security app. Quiet, discreet, sitting on my phone in a folder Caleb had never bothered to tap. Secure cam, motion event, lobby, Tuesday 9:13 p.m. I opened it, thumb moving almost on its own. I scrolled back to Tuesday night, to the time frame that matched the hotel charges I'd memorized. There he was, Caleb walking into the lobby in his favorite charcoal suit, tie loosened, hair still perfect. He stopped just inside the doors and turned back, saying something to the person behind him. A woman slid into frame beside him, laughing. Lena. I didn't need the app's grainy zoom to recognize her. I'd seen her at company parties. I'd watched the way people gravitated toward her, a sleek blonde in a fitted sheath dress, with an Ivy League degree and a laugh designed for boardrooms. She touched his arm with a familiarity that didn't belong anywhere near my home. I tapped to zoom anyway, because sometimes you need your worst suspicions confirmed pixel by pixel. They stepped into the elevator. Caleb's hand slid to the small of her back. She leaned into him. The doors closed, carrying them up toward the floor I'd paid for. My stomach rolled. While I'd been at school on Tuesday night, staying late to set up a reading corner, because the district budget had cut our library aid, my husband had brought another woman into my penthouse. The one listed under the Odessa, Washington Family Trust. The one my grandmother's lawyer had described as prime, Naomi, a jewel. My jewel, my home, my life. I sat down on the edge of the bed, the footage still playing on my screen even though the elevator doors were long closed. My hands were steady. My heart was not. 5 years. 5 years of letting him believe his salary was the reason we could afford this zip code. 5 years of accepting his, "I've got it, babe," when the bill came, even though his card was paying a fraction of what I had in my accounts. 5 years of laughing off his, "You're so lucky I don't mind being the provider" jokes. The doorknob rattled behind me. "Naomi, come on," Caleb's voice called through the wood. "Don't be like this. Open the door." I stayed silent, watching my reflection overlaid on the frozen lobby feed. A woman in a simple tee and leggings, eyes darker than they'd been yesterday. "Babe, I'm sorry you heard that," he tried again. "It didn't mean anything. You know how guys talk when they're together?" I thought of Oliver imitating my life, of Langford asking if it bothered him to carry me, of Caleb admitting out loud that he wanted someone on my level. I thought of Lena's hand on his arm. "I'm tired," I called back, still looking out at the city. "I'm going to bed." A beat of silence. "Naomi, it's our anniversary. You can't just—" "I just did." He exhaled loudly. "Fine, we'll talk in the morning, okay? Get some sleep. Love you." I didn't answer. His footsteps retreated. The deeper murmur of male voices started up again, careful now, as if they knew a line had been crossed but were too cowardly to name it. In the glass, my reflection shifted. Teacher, heiress, wife, idiot. All of it sat on my shoulders at once. I picked up my phone and scrolled to a contact I hadn't used in months. Shaded. She answered on the first ring. "If you're calling to tell me you're already tired of anniversary sex, I swear I need a good divorce lawyer," I said. Silence. "What happened?" Her voice dropped fast, all jokes gone. I lay back on the bed, staring at the ceiling. A hairline crack I'd never noticed ran straight above our light fixture. "Funny. It felt metaphorical now. How much time do you have, Sornon? I asked. However much you need. So I told her. I told her about the conversation in the living room, about my salary served up as a joke, and my ambition questioned like a punchline, about the way he'd pause just long enough to answer truthfully when his boss asked if he resented me, about the someone on my level line that was still buzzing around my skull like a wasp. I told her about the credit card charges, the hotel, the jewelry, the dinners. I told her about Lena, about the elevator footage, about my penthouse. My penthouse, Jade, I said quietly. He brought her into my penthouse. She swore softly under her breath. Okay, I officially hate him. You told me not to marry a guy who corrected my grammar on our third date, I said. My laugh came out broken. I should have listened. I told you he liked the sound of his own voice too much, she corrected. And I told you the way he talked about your job made me want to throw something. But you were in love, and I get it. I thought he respected what I do, I whispered. I thought he respected me. Naomi, he loves how you make him feel, she replied. There was no softness in her tone now. There's a difference. One is about you, the other is about his ego. The word hung there between us, ego. It fit him like one of his custom suits. I already booked a meeting with a lawyer, I said, glancing at the notification, for Tuesday. I just didn't know if I'd actually go. You're going, Jade said, even if I have to drag you in wearing pajamas and slippers. I smiled weakly. They'd still be nicer than half his colleagues' suits. That's my girl, she said. There she is, the Naomi who doesn't need him. I looked around the room, the bed, the artwork, the skyline beyond the glass. Jade, yeah? When I tell him the truth about the penthouse, about the trust, what if it makes everything worse? She didn't hesitate. Naomi, he already told a room full of men that you weren't on his level. He already cheated on a woman he thought made 39 grand a year. The truth won't make him worse. It'll just show you who he always was. I swallowed. I'm scared, I admitted, of being alone. Of course, of starting over at 32. Of watching a marriage I'd fought for crumble. Of seeing him look at me not with disdain this time, but calculation, like a man realizing he misjudged an investment. Yeah, I said. Well, Jade replied, you know what my grandma always says? Better single than being the richest fool in the room, pretending you're poor so a man can feel rich? I laughed, really laughed for the first time that night. Your grandma is intense. Your grandma bought half this city, Jade reminded me. You come from intense. My chest tightened at the thought of her. Odessa, Washington. The woman who started with one tiny duplex on the edge of a bad neighborhood and turned it into an empire. The woman who wore the same black pumps for 15 years and still tipped waitresses like they were royalty. The woman who hugged me on her hospital bed and said, baby, money is a tool, not a trophy. Don't ever let a man hold it over you. Don't ever shrink so he can feel big. I think she'd be disappointed in me, I whispered. I think she'd be proud you finally picked up the hammer, Jade said. You've been sitting in a house you built and letting him act like he poured the foundation. It's time to remind him who owns the land. We stayed on the phone until my eyes burned and my voice went hoarse. After we hung up, the apartment was too quiet. I could hear muffled goodbyes at the front door, deep baritones in the distance, laughter dipping awkwardly as guests left. A few minutes later, the front door clicked shut. His footsteps moved toward the bedroom. I turned off the lamp and lay still. The doorknob turned, then rattled against the lock. Naomi? His voice was softer now. Can we talk? Tomorrow, I said. A pause. Okay, he murmured. Good night. I waited until I heard him settle on the couch. He always slept there when he felt sorry for himself. Before I unlocked my phone again, I opened the security app and downloaded the footage. Tuesday in the lobby, Tuesday in the elevator. I took screenshots, saved them. I pulled up his card statements I'd already photographed, the receipts, the hotel, the jewelry, evidence. Then I opened my email and drafted a message to Lisa Harper, the lawyer. Subject, tomorrow's meeting. Hi, Lisa. Something happened tonight that confirmed this is the right decision. I'll be there at 7 a.m. as scheduled. I also have additional financial and security documentation to bring. Thank you, Naomi. I hovered over send for half a second. Then I tapped. I set the phone down and stared up at that hairline crack above our light fixture again, tracing it with my eyes until the world blurred. Caleb thought this was his kingdom, thought this was his story with me playing the supporting role. He was about to learn that the woman he mocked for not earning enough owned the stage, the lights, and the building itself. And in the morning, I wasn't going to play small anymore. The alarm jolted me awake at 5:30 a.m., same as always. For a second in that blurry, half-dreaming space, my body moved on autopilot. Reach for the phone, hit snooze, roll into the warm spot where Caleb should have been. Except he wasn't there. The other side of the bed was untouched. Smooth. He hadn't come in at all. The memories surged back. Cracked glass, slick champagne. Lena's hand on his arm, his voice saying, "Someone on my level." Right. I lay there staring at the ceiling, watching the dim outline of that hairline crack above the light fixture. 5 years of my life, and this was where we'd landed. The coffee machine gurgled in the kitchen. Caleb always set it to auto brew at 6. The faint scent of dark roast drifted down the hall, like nothing had changed. What a joke. I swung my legs out of bed and padded to the bathroom. The woman in the mirror looked older than she had yesterday. Eyes swollen from crying I didn't remember doing. Mouth set in a line that used to know how to smile without effort. "You're going to a lawyer," I reminded my reflection quietly. "You're not going there to apologize, you're going there to end this." It helped. A little? I showered, dressed in my usual teacher uniform, knee-length skirt, soft blouse, practical flats. Clothes that said approachable and safe and definitely not a threat. The kind of clothes Caleb's colleagues expected a woman like me to wear. The kind of clothes that let me move through this city invisible while my accounts accrued more zeros. In the kitchen, Caleb was slumped at the island, still in last night's suit pants and a rumpled t-shirt. His hair was mussed, eyes shadowed. His untouched coffee steamed beside his elbow. He looked up when I walked in. For once, he didn't try to smile. "Naomi," he started. "I don't have time," I said calmly, reaching for a mug. "I have somewhere to be before school." He studied me like he was looking for cracks. "You barely slept." "Neither did you." "What are you doing this morning?" I met his eyes over the rim of my cup. "Taking care of myself." His jaw clenched at that. "Are we really doing this? Freezing each other out over some stupid comments my friends made?" My laugh was short and humorless. "You mean the stupid comments you joined in on?" "I was just—" He scrubbed a hand down his face. "It was a joke. You know how guys are. Everyone tries to outdo the other. It doesn't mean anything." "It meant something to me," I replied, "and that's enough. You know I don't actually think you're less than me." He leaned forward. "You know that, right?" I thought of his voice last night. Someone more ambitious. Someone on my level. And of all the tiny paper cuts he'd delivered over the years. "Sure, babe. We'll get you a nicer car once my bonus hits. Maybe you'd feel more confident if you dressed a little more polished. You're lucky I don't mind the gap in our salaries. Some men couldn't handle it." "I have to go," I said simply. I grabbed my bag and keys. "Naomi," his voice had an edge now, "we're not done talking." "No," I agreed, pausing in the doorway. "We're not. But the next conversation we have is going to be very different from what you're expecting." He frowned, confused, but I didn't give him room to reply. I walked out, closed the door gently behind me, and stepped into the private elevator that led straight down to the lobby. The irony wasn't lost on me. Riding an elevator in a building I owned to go see a lawyer about a man who thought he'd given me this life. The city was just waking up when I stepped onto the sidewalk. Gray light, delivery trucks. People in gym clothes clutching smoothies like trophies. I called a rideshare instead of taking my car. I didn't want Caleb noticing the mileage later and asking questions. Lisa Harper's office was in a glass tower downtown, all steel and sharp lines. The kind of place Caleb liked to point at and say, "That's the kind of building we're negotiating to lease floors in." I almost laughed as the elevator doors opened on the 22nd floor. Of course it would be here. The receptionist buzzed me in the moment she saw me. "Ms. Brooks, Ms. Harper's ready for you." I followed her down a quiet hallway into a corner office with floor-to-ceiling windows and dignified furniture that screamed tasteful money. A tall black woman in her 40s stood when I entered, hand extended, professional smile warm but assessing. "Naomi," she said, "I'm Lisa. I'm sorry we have to meet under these circumstances, but I'm glad you came." I shook her hand, grateful for the steadiness in her grip. "Thank you for seeing me so early. Mornings are when people are most honest," she said with a small shrug. "By afternoon, they've talked themselves out of what they already know they need to do." She gestured to the chair opposite her desk. "Why don't you start from the beginning?" The question felt enormous. Which beginning? The charity fundraiser? The day my grandmother signed everything over to me? Last night's champagne hitting the floor? I took a breath. My name is Naomi Brooks. I've been married for 5 years. My husband is a senior director at a tech firm. I'm a third-grade teacher. He believes he supports me. He believes we live in a rental. He believes I make $39,000 a year, and he carries everything financially. Lisa nodded, pen poised. And what's the truth? The truth is, my grandmother built a real estate portfolio worth over $30 million, I said. My voice steadied as I spoke, as if saying it out loud reattached me to myself. She left it to me in a trust. I control it. I bought the penthouse we live in outright 6 months before I met him. The deed is in the Odessa, Washington Family Trust. I also own 3 other properties in the city, plus investments. And your husband doesn't know any of this? No, I swallowed. He thinks we got a crazy good rent-controlled deal from a friend's aunt. Lisa's mouth twitched. And why didn't you tell him? Because I've watched what money does to people, I answered instantly. I've seen friends disappear into entitlement, men suddenly expecting me to bankroll their dreams, family members turning kind requests into demands. I wanted to be loved as a person, not as a walking asset. And do you feel loved as a person? She asked quietly. My throat tightened. I felt chosen, I said. For a while, I convinced myself that was enough. But over the last few years, it's felt more like I was chosen because I made him look generous. Like I was his proof that he was a good guy. He could say, I don't mind that my wife doesn't make much, I take care of her. And last night? Last night, he turned me into a joke. My hands curled into fists in my lap. He told his colleagues I make less than $40,000. He laughed when they called my career a little teaching job. His boss asked him if it bothered him to carry me financially, and he said yes. Sometimes it did, that he loved me, but he wondered what life would be like with someone on his level. Lisa's gaze sharpened. And is there infidelity? I pulled out my phone, opened the security app, and slid it across her desk. Lobby camera, Tuesday night. That's his assistant. There are hotel charges on his card that line up with nights he said he was working late, dinners at restaurants we've never been to together, jewelry he bought that I never received. She watched the footage, her face giving nothing away. When it ended, she nodded once. Okay, she said. You're not here to decide whether you're overreacting. You're here because you already know the answer. I let out a shaky breath I hadn't realized I was holding. I don't want to stay married to someone who sees me as a burden. And I definitely don't want to stay married to someone who cheats and brings the other woman into my home. That's clear, Lisa agreed. So let's talk strategy. She opened a folder on her desk and took out a blank intake form. First one on her, do you have a prenup? I almost laughed. Yes, his lawyer drafted it. It protects his assets and ensures I walk away with nothing if we divorce. Lisa raised an eyebrow. Does it mention your trust? No. I shook my head. He doesn't know it exists. When we signed, my grandmother's attorney had already structured things so my assets were separate. The prenup only lists his company shares, his stock options, his car, his 401k. Good, Lisa said. Then we can use his own document to our advantage. The prenup keeps his assets separate from yours. But since your wealth predates the marriage and is held in a trust, it's already protected. He doesn't get a dime. A knot in my stomach loosened slightly. What about the penthouse? I asked. He's been living there for 5 years, paying me $800 a month. Was there ever a lease? She asked. No. I told him I had a connection and could get us in cheap. He insisted on covering the rent. I never gave him paperwork. Then legally, he's been a guest who's been giving you a monthly gift, Lisa said. He has no tenancy rights tied to a lease. The deed is in the trust's name, established before the marriage. The property is yours. He's going to lose his mind, I murmured. He might, she said, but being angry doesn't give him rights he doesn't have. She jotted notes, then looked back at me. You told me he works at a tech firm, senior position. Does his company have a fraternization policy? I don't know, I said. He mentions HR like it's an annoying aunt. I'm sure they have something. We'll find out, she said. If he's in a relationship with his subordinate and hasn't disclosed it, that's a violation in most corporate policy handbooks. I'm not saying we weaponize it immediately, but it's leverage, especially if he tries to come after you for anything. I thought of Caleb's face if he got fired, of the way his identity was wrapped up in that job, in the title, in the corner office he loved to mention. I don't want to be petty, I said slowly. I want to protect myself, and I want him to feel the weight of what he's done. Naomi, Lisa said, leaning forward. Wanting accountability isn't pettiness. He has been living a double life, emotionally and financially. You've been honest with him about everything you were allowed to be honest about, while he's been dishonest about the most fundamental parts of your marriage. I nodded. She slid a stack of papers toward me. This is a basic divorce petition. We'll claim irreconcilable differences. No mudslinging in the filing itself. We keep it clean. Because of the prenup and your separate assets, this can be straightforward if he doesn't fight it. And if he does, then we use everything, she said simply. The footage, the hotel receipts, the property records, the fact that he's been misrepresenting his living situation to colleagues and possibly to his company from a financial standpoint. She let that hang in the air. I want this to be over as quickly as possible, I said. Then here's what I recommend, Lisa replied. We file this week. We serve him at work in a professional environment where he's less likely to explode. At the same time, we serve a notice revoking his right to occupy the penthouse. Because he has no legal claim to it, you can ask him to vacate immediately. We'll schedule a police-supervised window for him to pick up his personal belongings. Clothes, personal electronics, nothing more. The image of Caleb being escorted out of his home by police flickered in my mind. He'd hate that. He'd also created the circumstances that made it necessary. What about the timing, I asked. I teach. I can't be in court every week, and I don't want this mess bleeding into my classroom. We can file electronically, as she said. The first hearing will likely be in a few weeks, and I can schedule it for early morning. You'll be out before first period. As for serving him, we can time it while you're at work so you're not present for the immediate reaction. I thought of my students, their crooked smiles, their messy handwriting, the way they called me Miss B when they were excited and Miss Brooks when they were worried. They didn't need to see any of this. Okay, I said, let's do it. Lisa handed me a pen. Before you sign, one more thing, she said. When he finds out about your money, he's going to accuse you of lying. He's going to tell you that if he'd known the truth, everything would have been different. He may try to guilt you into giving him something. Anything. A payout, a car, a piece of property as a consolation prize. She met my eyes. I need you to decide now before we start what your answer to that will be. I knew what Caleb would say. I could hear it already, his incredulous voice. You let me believe I was supporting you. I also knew how much of my life I'd already sacrificed to his ego. My answer is no, I said quietly. He doesn't get anything from me. Not because I'm cruel, because he doesn't deserve it. Lisa smiled a little. Good, then sign. I signed. Each stroke of my name felt like reclaiming a piece of myself. When we finished, Lisa gathered the paperwork. I'll file today, she said. He can be served as early as tomorrow, depending on his office's access. In the meantime, I want you to go to work. Be with your kids. Stick to your routine. Don't warn him. Don't hint. Don't pick fights. Let the papers speak for you. A small, bitter laugh escaped me. I've been keeping his ego comfortable for 5 years. Silent treatment's the least I can manage. At the door, she paused. Naomi? Yeah? You're not being dramatic, she said. You're being brave. Don't let him or anyone convince you otherwise. The words sank into me like warm water. For the first time since last night, I felt something that wasn't just anger or hurt. I felt steady. At school, the world shrank to colored pencils and spelling tests. My students didn't care that my husband had humiliated me in front of his boss. They cared that we were having a fractions quiz and that I'd promised if everyone passed, I'd bring donuts on Friday. Their energy was pure, and being around them calmed my nervous system in a way no adult conversation could. Miss Brooks, are you okay? One of my kids, Jayla, asked midway through the morning. You look kind of sad. Kids, they always notice. I'm okay, I said gently. Just a little tired, but seeing you all helps. She seemed satisfied with that. At lunch, I sat alone in my classroom, nibbling on a sandwich I couldn't taste and watching the notification bar on my phone. No calls yet from Caleb. No angry texts. Either he was stewing and waiting to confront me in person, or the papers just hadn't arrived. I thought back to the beginning of us, letting my mind replay the parts I'd buried. The first year had been golden. He'd brought me flowers just because. Taken me to restaurants I'd only read about. Introduced me to his friends with pride. This is Naomi. She's a teacher. She changes little humans' lives every day. Back then, it had felt like admiration. But slowly, something shifted. The first snide comment had been small. We were at dinner with one of his coworkers and his fiancée. Everyone was talking about bonuses and raises. I'd mentioned that our district hadn't increased teacher pay in years. Naomi likes the stability, Caleb had said, reaching for my hand. She doesn't need much. She's simple that way. Everyone laughed, including me, even as the word burned. Simple. The next had been at his company holiday party. I'd worn my nicest dress, spent 2 hours watching YouTube tutorials to get my makeup right. He'd introduced me to his CEO. "This is my wife, Naomi," he'd said, that apologetic note sneaking into his voice for the first time. "She teaches third graders." The CEO had nodded vaguely. "Ah, noble work." The conversation had shifted away from me immediately, back to numbers and projections. Driving home that night, I'd said, "You make it sound like I'm some charity project." He'd looked over, genuinely confused. "What are you talking about?" "The way you say it," I'd explained. "She teaches third graders. Like you're explaining why I don't belong in the room." He'd sighed. "Naomi, you're being sensitive. I'm proud of what you do. I'm out here closing deals so you can do what you love without worrying about money. Most guys wouldn't be okay with their wife making a fraction of what they do. I am. You're welcome." I'd let it go. I wish I hadn't. Because that's how it kept going. All these little moments where my life was cast as cute and his as serious. My contribution emotional, his financial. Mine soft, his hard. The scale between us had been tilting for years. I just kept pretending we were balanced. At 3 o'clock, dismissal bell ringing in my ears. My phone finally buzzed with a number I recognized. "Lisa," I answered on the second ring. "It's done," she said. "He's been served at his office." The process server said he looked stunned. "What did he say?" I asked. "He asked if it was a joke." The server told him no. "He tried to call you immediately after. Don't answer yet. Let him sit in it." I pulled the phone away. Sure enough, a missed call from Caleb. Then another. Then 3 unread text alerts stacked one on top of the other like angry bricks. "He's also been emailed a notice revoking his right to occupy the penthouse," Lisa continued. "I've contacted building management. You're the only one authorized on the lease and title. They're updating security access now." "Can he still get in today?" I asked, glancing at the clock. "Before I get home?" "Not without someone letting him up," she said. "I've requested a locksmith to meet you at your door at 5. By tonight, his key fob won't work. If he wants to collect his belongings, it will be under police supervision at a scheduled time. I'll propose tomorrow afternoon." I let the information wash over me. This was happening. It wasn't just an idea or an angry fantasy anymore. It was walking paperwork marching through his carefully curated life. "Naomi," Lisa's voice softened. "How are you feeling?" I looked around my empty classroom. Construction paper projects, the daily agenda still written on the whiteboard, the smell of dry erase markers and crayons. "I feel like I'm finally telling the truth," I said. "Good," she replied. "Call me if he shows up tonight. If he threatens you in any way, you dial 911 first, then me. Understood?" "Understood." After we hung up, I checked Caleb's messages. "Caleb, Naomi, what is this?" "Caleb, tell me you didn't just have me served at the office." "Caleb, we are not doing this. You don't file for divorce because of one bad night. Call me, now." One bad night. Funny how he reduced years into that. I didn't answer. Instead, I grabbed my bag, turned off the lights, and locked my classroom door. On the drive home, the skyline loomed ahead, familiar and strange. That building, my building, rose above the others, glass catching the late afternoon sun. For 5 years, it had been the backdrop of Caleb's bragging rights. Tonight, it would be the scene of his eviction. I pulled into the underground garage and parked in my usual spot. The security guard at the desk in the lobby straightened when he saw me. "Ms. Brooke," he said, "management told us to expect you. A locksmith is on the way up to your unit. Also, Mr. Mercer came by about an hour ago. We informed him his access was revoked and that he'll need to schedule a supervised visit to retrieve personal items." "How did he take it?" I asked. The guard's mouth twitched. Loudly, I exhaled slowly. "Thank you for handling it." "That's our job, ma'am," he said. Then more quietly, "It's good to know the real owner of that penthouse finally said something." My head snapped up. "You knew!" He shrugged. "We see the paperwork, Ms. Brooks. We know whose name is on what. Some of us have been waiting a long time for this." The elevator ride up felt different this time. It wasn't the carriage taking me to Caleb's castle. It was carrying me home. When I stepped into the penthouse, everything was exactly where I'd left it that morning. The shattered champagne glass had been cleaned, of course. Caleb would never leave a mess if there was even a tiny chance someone might see it. The air felt still, charged. I walked to the windows and looked out at the city, My phone buzzing again in my hand. Another text from Caleb, angrier this time. Caleb, you changed the access to the building? Are you out of your mind? This is my home too. My fingers flew over the screen before I could overthink it. Naomi, no, Caleb, it's not. Naomi, it's mine. It always has been. I didn't hit send yet. Because when I told him this, when I told him the truth about the money and the deed and the trust, there would be no going back. No room for pretending. He'd finally see me. Not the version of me he'd constructed to make himself feel like a savior. The real me. The granddaughter of Odessa, Washington. The woman who sat on millions and chose to stand in a classroom anyway. The wife he thought was beneath him. And once he saw that, our roles in this story would flip for good. I stared at the unsent message, thumb hovering. Then I thought of his voice in that living room, casual and confident. I think about what life would be like with someone on my level. I hit send. The revenge I realized wasn't in destroying him. It was in finally forcing him to look up and realize the woman he'd been stepping on all this time had been standing above him, quietly, all along. His reply came in less than 30 seconds. Caleb, what is that supposed to mean? Caleb, Naomi, stop playing games. This is our home. I've been paying for this place for 5 years. My phone started ringing before I finished reading. I let it buzz once, twice. On the third ring, I answered. His voice exploded through the speaker. What the hell are you doing? Good afternoon to you too, I said quietly. Don't start with that calm tone, he snapped. You had me served at the office like some criminal. You cut off my building access, and now you're sending weird texts about the apartment being yours. Have you lost your mind? No, I said. For the first time in a long time, I think I've found it. You can't just file for divorce without talking to me, he said. That's not how marriage works. No. You mean the way you talked to me before you brought your assistant into my home? I asked. Or the way you consulted me before you told your boss you wished you had a more ambitious wife? He didn't answer. I'm coming up, he said finally. Buzz me in. You can't, I reminded him. Security already removed your credentials. So override it. Tell them to let me up, now. No. He went very quiet. When he spoke again, his voice was low and dangerous. Naomi, don't do this. You're angry, I get it. But you're not thinking clearly. This is my residence. I have rights. Actually, I said, you don't. What is that supposed to mean? I walked to the windows, staring down at the tiny people moving along the sidewalk. Do you remember when we moved in here? I asked. When I told you I'd found a rent-controlled miracle through a friend of a friend? He scoffed. Obviously. I was the one who said we should grab it before someone else did. And I've been covering the rent ever since. Right, I said. $800 a month. Yeah, because you said it was some under-market deal. I figured your friend was giving us a break. The rent was under market, I said. Because there was no rent. It's not a rental unit, Caleb. A beat of silence. What? The Penthouse isn't a rental, I repeated. It's owned outright by the Odessa, Washington Family Trust. He let out a short, disbelieving laugh. Okay, and who exactly is Odessa, Washington in this little fantasy? My grandmother, I said. The woman who spent 40 years buying and flipping property in this city. The woman whose trust I control. I bought this penthouse 6 months before I met you. Paid cash. No mortgage. No landlord. The only landlord here is me. The silence on his end turned into a vacuum. Stop lying, he said finally. You couldn't afford a place like that. You're a teacher. I am a teacher, I said, and I'm also the sole beneficiary of a real estate portfolio worth just over $33 million. You're joking. Pull the deed, I said, my voice steady. Call whatever real estate contact you have. Look up Unit 2701. You won't see your name anywhere. You'll see the name of my grandmother's trust, the same trust my lawyer referenced in the divorce papers you got today. You've been sitting on $33 million this whole time, he demanded, while I've been killing myself to support you? No one asked you to kill yourself, I said. I told you from the beginning I could take care of myself. You refused to hear it. You liked the story where you were the savior. That's not fair. Fair, I repeated, feeling heat flare in my chest. You think fair is listening to you tell your colleagues it bothers you to carry me when my passive income alone could cover our lifestyle and three others? You think fair is you mocking my salary when I chose to work because I care about kids, not because I have to? If you had all that money, why didn't you say anything? He demanded. Why did you let me believe that you were the provider? I cut in. That you were the one making this life possible? Maybe because every time I tried to talk about finances, you made it clear you liked the power dynamic exactly as it was. That's not true, he shot back. If I'd known. What? I asked softly. If you'd known, you'd have respected me, treated me better? You're proving my point, Caleb. Your respect shouldn't be conditional on my net worth. He sucked in a breath. You made a fool of me, he said, the words quiet and raw, in front of everyone. I've been bragging about this place, about how I landed it, about how I take care of you. Do you know how it makes me look to find out I've been living in my wife's investment property like some charity case? That wasn't my goal, I said. But the way you look now, that's on you. You're the one who chose to belittle me, to cheat, to bring another woman into my home. You can't just throw me out, he said, rage creeping back into his voice. My clothes are there, my stuff, my life. I didn't throw you out, I said. My lawyer served you with an eviction notice. You'll have a chance to collect your personal belongings under supervision. After that, you don't live here anymore. He laughed bitterly. You think a judge is going to sign off on that? You think anyone's going to look at this and not see you as a vindictive, rich? Careful, I warned. He cut himself off. You're not the victim here, Naomi, he said through gritted teeth. You lied to me for 5 years. I protected myself, I replied, from exactly this reaction, from someone who would see dollar signs instead of a partner. I glanced at the time. The officers will be here at 5 tomorrow, I continued. You'll have 30 minutes to pack your clothes and personal items. That's more kindness than you showed me when you walked another woman into my living room. You're enjoying this, he said. Admit it. I thought of the shattered glass, of my kids' faces, of the way my grandmother's voice sounded in my head. No, I said. There's nothing enjoyable about watching a marriage die. But there is satisfaction in knowing I finally stopped helping you pretend you were someone you're not. He was breathing hard on the other end. I could almost see him, jaw clenched, eyes narrowed, calculating his next move. This isn't over, he said finally. You can't erase 5 years like they were nothing. I'm not erasing them, I said quietly. I'm just refusing to let the worst parts define the rest of my life. I hung up. My hand shook for a full minute afterward. The adrenaline crash came in waves. My body knew this was dangerous in ways my mind was only beginning to process. I texted Jade, Naomi, told him about the trust, the penthouse, everything. Jade. And Naomi. He's oscillating between calling me a liar and calling himself a fool. Eviction is tomorrow under police supervision. Jade. Good. Let him pack his fragile ego in a carry-on and roll it out himself. Despite myself, I smiled. The next afternoon, my phone rang 15 minutes before dismissal. Building security. Marco. Ms. Brooks, he said when I answered, just confirming you still want the police present at 5 o'clock for Mr. Mercer's supervised access. Yes, I said, absolutely. He tried to come up again earlier, Marco added. We turned him away per your attorney's notice. He wasn't happy. I'm sure he wasn't, I murmured. Thank you. Don't worry, Marco said. We've got eyes everywhere. He doesn't set foot past the lobby without your permission. It struck me then. How many people had known the truth about this building before Caleb did? The management office, the security team, the concierge who had always greeted me as Ms. Brooks and him as Mr. Brooks because it was easier that way. Caleb had been the last to know. He'd also been the most convinced he knew everything. At exactly 4:45, Marco called again. He's here, he said, and the 2 officers just arrived as well. Should we send them all up? I'll come down, I said. Give me 3 minutes. My heart pounded all the way down in the private elevator. But when the doors slid open into the lobby, something in me settled. He looked smaller. Not physically. Caleb was still tall, broad-shouldered, handsome in that polished LinkedIn profile way. but stripped of his usual confidence. No tailored suit tonight, just dark jeans, a wrinkled button-down, and the uncertainty of someone who just discovered the ground beneath him wasn't really his. Two uniformed officers stood a few feet away, arms relaxed but attentive. "Naomi," he said, stepping toward me. His eyes flicked from my face to the elevator behind me, to the officers. "Tell them this is unnecessary." I turned to one of the officers. "This is the individual named in the eviction order, Caleb Mercer." The officer nodded. "And you are the property owner, ma'am?" "I am," I said. "Naomi Brooks, trustee of the Odessa Washington Family Trust." Caleb let out a humorless laugh. "Listen to yourself. You sound like a press release." The officer ignored him. "Here's how this works, Mr. Mercer. You'll be escorted up to the unit. You have 30 minutes to collect clothing, personal toiletries, documents, and personal electronics. No furniture, no artwork, nothing that could be considered joint property." "Joint property," Caleb barked. "I paid for half that furniture." I met his gaze. "Check your records. That bed, my card, the sofa, my card, the dining table, my card. You offered to pay, remember? I told you I had it covered. You liked feeling gallant so much you didn't notice I wasn't letting you go into debt to impress me." He flushed. "You're really going to nickel and dime me like this?" he asked, voice low. "After everything we've been through?" "I'm not nickeling and diming anything," I replied. "I'm drawing boundaries. Something I should have done a long time ago." One of the officers glanced at his watch. "We should get started." The ride up was claustrophobic. Caleb stood on one side of the elevator, shoulders tight, fists flexing. The officers were between us, a living barrier. When we stepped into the penthouse, he froze just inside the door. "No suitcase?" I asked mildly. "You're on the clock." He shot me a look full of old affection and fresh resentment. "How long have you been planning this?" he asked. "Since the first suspicious charge I saw in your statement," I said. "Since the first time your late nights lined up perfectly with hotel receipts." He dropped his gaze, jaw flexing. "I never slept with her here," he muttered, as if that made him less guilty. "Congratulations on not disrespecting me in that one additional way," I said. "You still brought her into my home." He didn't argue. He moved through the bedroom, yanking shirts from hangers, grabbing belts, shoving socks into duffel bags. The officers hovered in the doorway, watching. "Can I take this?" he asked at one point, holding up the framed photo from our wedding day. Two kids at City Hall, me in a simple dress, him in a suit that wasn't custom yet. Our smiles bright, hopeful, untouched by bitterness. "If you want it," I said. "I don't." He stared at the picture for a long moment. Then he set it face down on the dresser and walked away. 23 minutes later, he'd filled 2 suitcases and a large backpack. His entire presence in this place, reduced to a few bags. He stood in the living room, looking around like he was trying to memorize it. "You really lived here before me?" he asked suddenly. "Alone? In all this space?" "Yes," I said, "in sweatpants, eating cheap takeout, grading papers on that couch you always bragged about napping on. I just—" He shook his head slowly. "I can't wrap my mind around the fact that you'd rather hide all of this than share it with me." "Share it with you how?" I asked quietly. "By letting you call the shots with money you didn't earn? By watching you use my assets to impress your colleagues while you made jokes about my career? You didn't want a partner, Caleb. You wanted a story where you were the hero. And what are you now?" he demanded. "The villain? The ice queen who kicks her husband out and ruins his life?" "I'm the person you underestimated," I said. "What happens to your life from here is up to you." One of the officers cleared his throat. "Time's up, sir." Caleb grabbed the suitcases, rolling them toward the door. At the threshold, he paused and looked back at me. "For what it's worth," he said, voice tight, "I did love you." "At the beginning," I said. "I know." He flinched. "And now?" he asked, almost desperate. "Now," I said, "I love myself enough not to stay with someone who doesn't respect me." He stared at me for a long moment like he was searching for a different answer. He didn't find one. He walked out. The officers followed him into the hall. The door closed behind them with a soft finality that echoed louder than any slammed door could have. Silence fell. Real silence. Not the tense, waiting kind. Not the quiet where you listen for footsteps or doors or his voice. Just stillness. I stood in the center of the living room and turned in a slow circle. Same decor, same view, same furniture. Different energy. For 5 years, this place had carried the weight of his narrative. I'm the provider. I make this possible. Now that story was gone. This was mine again. I walked over to the windows and leaned my forehead against the glass, watching the city transition from day to night. Headlights flicked on. Office buildings glowed. Somewhere down there, Caleb was dragging his suitcases to a car, calling someone, maybe Oliver, maybe the boss who'd laughed about my paycheck, to spin a version of this that made him the victim. I let him go. My phone buzzed. Lisa. Is he out? She asked. Yes, I said. Took clothes, laptop, whatever he could fit in 2 suitcases. Good, she said. I'll follow up with the court tomorrow about formalizing the separation of residence. In the meantime, you're secure. Security has orders not to admit him without your written permission. Thank you, I said. There's one more thing we should discuss, she added. The fraternization policy. Of course. Did you find it? I asked. I did, she said. His company's employee handbook is very clear. Any romantic relationship between a supervisor and a direct report must be disclosed to HR and approved by the executive board. Failure to do so is grounds for disciplinary action up to and including termination. And you're sure they haven't disclosed? I called HR under the guise of a compliance audit, she admitted. There are 2 disclosed relationships on file. Neither involves Caleb or Lena. I thought of them at the hotel, at the wine bar, on my security feed, the way his hand had rested on her waist like it belonged there. What happens if someone sends HR proof? I asked. They're obligated to investigate, she said, especially at his level. It's a liability issue. I watched the lights flicker in a skyscraper across from mine. Draft the report, I said. Anonymous. Attach whatever evidence we can legally use. Security footage, timestamps, credit card charges. Lisa was quiet for a moment. You're sure? She asked. Once we send it, there's no undoing it. I'm sure, I said. His choices shouldn't be my burden to carry anymore. Let him answer to the people he actually cares about impressing. Understood, she said. I'll have it out by morning. After we hung up, I wandered into the bedroom and sat on the edge of the bed. The indentation on his side was still there, pressed into the mattress by years of sleep and late-night laptop scrolling. I smoothed my hand over it, then over my own side. How did we get here? I asked the empty room. I thought of all the points where things could have gone differently, where he could have listened instead of dismissing, where I could have enforced boundaries instead of shrinking. But then I remembered something my grandmother had told me once, when I'd cried over a boy who broke my heart in college. Baby, some men are elevators, she'd said, stroking my hair. They take you up, they take you down. But you gotta remember, it's your building. You decide which floor you step out on. Don't stay inside just because you're scared to walk into your own hallway. I'd stayed way too long in Caleb's elevator. I was stepping out now. That night, for the first time in months, I slept through till morning. No lying awake listening for the key in the door. No wondering who he was texting. No replaying his comments in my head. Just dark, then light. When I woke, the space beside me was still empty. And instead of hurting, it felt honest. At school, my kids noticed I was lighter. Miss Brooks, you're smiling weird, Jayla said suspiciously. Like, extra. I had a good night's sleep, I said. Sometimes that's all it takes. In the staff lounge, I caught my reflection in the microwave door. I did look different. Not because of makeup or hair or clothes, but because there was a new line of steel under the softness. At lunch, I checked my email. One from Lisa. Subject, report sent. Body, anonymous complaint with attached documentation has been submitted to his HR department. I'll let you know if we hear anything. Focus on living your life. Let the dominoes fall where they may. I closed my eyes for a second and exhaled. This was it. The legal match had been struck. The professional fuse had been lit. Whatever came next for Caleb, with his job, his reputation, his new on-his-level assistant, was out of my hands. For the first time in 5 years, my future actually felt like it belonged to me. and I had no intention of shrinking for anyone ever again. The call from Lisa came 2 days after she'd sent the anonymous report. I was in my classroom after school, the last of my kids having tumbled out the door with their backpacks half open and their permission slips half signed. The room was quiet, the kind of quiet that hums in your ears after a long, loud day. My phone buzzed on the desk. "Tell me you have good news," I said, not even bothering with hello. "That depends on your definition of good," Lisa replied. I could hear papers rustling on her end. Caleb's company opened an investigation immediately after the report hit their inbox. They pulled security footage from the office, checked travel logs, cross-referenced expense reports. My heart beat faster. And they called him in this morning," she said. "HR and the chief legal officer. Your name never came up. They treated it strictly as a policy issue. He admitted to a personal relationship with Lena and admitted he never disclosed it." I leaned back in my chair, staring up at the ceiling tiles. "Let me guess. They don't accept that." "Correct," she said. "He was terminated, effective immediately." I thought I'd feel triumphant. Instead, I felt tired. "He'll blame me," I said quietly. "Probably," Lisa agreed. "Men like that rarely look in the mirror willingly. But you didn't make him cross that line. You just made sure he couldn't keep pretending he hadn't." I traced the outline of a doodle one of my kids had left on the corner of my desk, a lopsided cat with hearts for eyes. "What happens now?" I asked. "Now we keep the divorce moving," she said. "He's already hired his own lawyer. They sent over a predictably outraged email this morning, accusing you of ambushing him and profiting off his labor." I rolled my eyes. "Of course." I responded with the trust documents, the prenup he drafted, the property records, and a polite reminder that his client has been living rent-free in a multi-million-dollar property he never owned. She said dryly, "I don't expect him to fight much. Without leverage, it's not worth the legal bills." The idea that Caleb didn't have leverage anymore, that for once in our relationship, his job title and salary couldn't bully me into submission, felt like sunshine cracking through clouds. "Thank you, Lisa," I said, "for everything." "Don't thank me yet," she said. "Wait until the judge signs. But if you want my professional opinion, this is going to end more cleanly than most. You did the hard thing early, before the rot spread any further." After we hung up, I sat alone in my classroom, listening to the faint sounds of other teachers packing up, hallways echoing with the custodians' rolling carts. Caleb had lost his job. He'd lost his home. He'd lost me. A few months earlier, the idea of that would have made me sick with guilt. Now it just felt like the natural consequence of decisions he'd made while I'd been too busy grading spelling tests and hiding who I was. My phone buzzed again. Not Lisa, Caleb. I'd unblocked him after the eviction, not because I wanted to talk, but because I decided I wanted to see whatever he chose to send. I didn't want any more secrets, not even self-protective ones. His text was short. "Caleb, they fired me. HR had everything. The hotel logs, the expense reports, us at the bar, us in the lobby. You did this." I stared at the screen for a long moment. Then I typed back, "Naomi, you did this. They just finally saw it." He replied instantly, "Caleb, if you told me from the start about the money, about the penthouse, I wouldn't have looked elsewhere. I felt like I was carrying you, like I was alone. You made me feel like a wallet." The irony of that almost made me laugh. "Naomi, you felt alone while you were mocking me to your friends and flirting with your assistant?" "Naomi, I lied by omission to protect myself. You lied with your whole mouth to protect your ego. Those are not the same." 3 blinking dots appeared, then disappeared. He tried again. "Caleb, I'm going to look like a complete idiot when people find out you were rich this whole time. Caleb, was that the plan? Humiliate me?" "Naomi, the plan was to stop letting you humiliate me." "Naomi, if you're embarrassed, maybe sit with that instead of trying to throw it back at me." This time there was no reply. For the first time in years, I set my phone face down without waiting for his next message. I finished grading math quizzes. I straightened the bookshelves. I taped back up the crooked welcome banner one of my kids had tugged loose. Then I went home to my penthouse, my home, to an empty bed that felt more honest than a warm one ever had. The divorce hearing was strangely anticlimactic. Weeks passed between that first service at his office and our day in court. Weeks in which we barely spoke, communicating only through lawyers. Weeks in which I learned how much space Caleb's moods had occupied in my brain. Without him, there was so much room. Room to think. Room to breathe. Room to remember who I'd been before his opinion of me became the loudest voice in my head. On the morning of the hearing, I put on a simple black dress and a pair of low heels. No statement outfit, no design or anything. Just clothes I felt steady in. In the courtroom, Caleb sat across the aisle, wearing a suit that was just a little shinier than his old ones. Cheaper fabric, no subtle hand-stitched details. He looked thinner. His hair wasn't quite as precisely cut. Our eyes met once. I saw anger there, yes, but under it, I saw something else. Fear, maybe regret. The judge was brisk, flipping through the stack of documents like she'd seen 100 variations of this story before. "You were married 5 years," she said, peering over her glasses. "There are no children, correct?" "Correct, Your Honor," Lisa and Caleb's lawyer said in unison. "You have a prenuptial agreement that keeps assets separate." "Yes, Your Honor." "Mom. The wife's assets are held in a pre-existing trust established prior to the marriage." The judge looked at Caleb's lawyer. "Any challenge to that?" He shifted in his seat. "No, Your Honor. And the husband's assets are entirely self-contained. Retirement accounts, savings, a vehicle." "Yes, Your Honor," the lawyer said again. "Given that, the division of property is simple," the judge concluded. "Each party retains what they brought into the marriage and what they acquired individually. The residence is owned by the wife's trust. The husband has no legal claim." Caleb's jaw tightened. "Do either of you have anything you'd like to say before I finalize this?" the judge asked. Caleb's lawyer gave him a subtle elbow. He stood slowly. "Your Honor," he said, voice hoarse, I didn't know who I married. She hid who she was from me for 5 years. I understand the legalities, but I think it's wrong that I walk away with nothing when I believed I was contributing equally to a life that turned out to be a lie." The judge turned to me. "Ms. Brooks?" I stood, heart pounding but spine straight. "With respect, Your Honor," I said, "I didn't lie about who I was. I told him I was a teacher. That's still true. I hid my money because I've watched how it changes people. I wanted someone who valued me for my character, not my net worth." I glanced at Caleb. "He says he didn't know who he married. But I also didn't know who I married," I continued. "I married a man who once admired what I did, then started to belittle it, who laughed when his friends mocked my salary, who brings another woman into my home and calls it stress relief. I may have hidden my bank account. He hid his lack of respect." I took a breath. The law says we each keep what's ours. I accept that. And I accept that the price of protecting myself was losing someone who couldn't love me unless he thought he was above me. That's not a price I regret paying. The judge studied me for a long moment. "Marriage is about many things," she said. "Love, trust, partnership, and yes, money. Too many couples treat finances like a taboo subject, then are surprised when secrets turn into resentments." She set her pen down. "From a legal standpoint, this is clear. From a moral standpoint," she sighed, "you both have things to examine. But that examination doesn't happen in my courtroom. It happens in your lives." She lifted the gavel. "Divorce granted." The sharp crack echoed through the room like a door slamming shut. Just like that, 5 years became paperwork. Outside the courthouse, the air felt colder than it should have for late spring. Caleb caught up to me on the steps. "Naomi," he called. "Wait." I turned. Up close, the changes in him were even more obvious. There were new lines around his eyes. The confidence he used to wear like a second skin was cracked. "I know you don't have to talk to me," he said, "but I need you to know. I get it now. All of it. The way I talked about your job, the comments about your salary, the way I made fun of something that meant the world to you." He swallowed. "I was insecure," he admitted. "Being the big earner was the one thing I had. It made me feel important. And when I thought I carried you, it made me feel necessary." Hearing that you were the one with the real money, he shook his head. It broke something in me, he said, but it also forced me to see the truth. You were never beneath me. You were never a burden. I just needed you to be so I could feel tall. The admission landed heavy. I'm in therapy, he added quickly, like that might soften the history. They say I have a lot of work to do. No surprise there. He gave a humorless laugh. I'm not asking you to forgive me, he said. I don't deserve that yet. I wanted you to know I'm not blaming you anymore. For the job, for the divorce, for any of it. I did this. To myself. To us. A year ago, those words would have undone me. Now they just felt like a mirror he'd finally agreed to look into. I hope you keep doing the work, I said honestly. For you, not for me. He nodded. Are you happy? He asked quietly. The question surprised me, but the answer came easily. Yes, I said, I am. He nodded again, eyes glossy. Good, he said. You deserve that. You always did. He turned to go. Caleb? He glanced back. I did love you, I said, even when I shouldn't have, even when it hurt. He closed his eyes for a second. I know, he whispered, and that might be the thing I regret most. Then he walked away, down the courthouse steps, blending into the crowd, shrinking into the city that had once felt like it revolved around him. He didn't look back. Neither did I. Freedom, I discovered, is loud at first. All that empty time where someone's needs, someone's moods, someone's expectations used to live, it roared. The first weeks after the divorce were strange. I'd bump into memories everywhere. The coffee shop where he used to take calls on speakerphone too loudly. The park bench where he'd once said he loved that I was low maintenance. The Italian restaurant where he'd told his mother he'd take care of me so she wouldn't worry about the finances. But as summer approached, those memories faded from sharp, fresh pain into faint outlines. In the space they left, something else grew. Plans. I met with a financial planner who'd been one of my grandmother's oldest advisors, a soft-spoken man named Arthur with kind eyes and an endless supply of spreadsheets. You've done well, he said, sliding a thick folder toward me one afternoon. You've been cautious. Your grandmother would be proud. I've been hiding, I corrected gently. There's a difference. Yes, he said, and perhaps now you're ready for the next stage. Together, we created something I'd been dreaming about since I first stood in front of a room full of 8-year-olds. The Odessa Washington Education Fund. Scholarships for first-generation college students, grants for underfunded schools, money for art supplies and library books, and after-school programs. We structured it so the fund could operate for generations, not just years. You're turning pain into purpose, Arthur said when we signed the last form. Maybe, I said. Or maybe I'm just finally using what I have for what it was always meant for. The first scholarship application I read made me cry at my kitchen counter. A girl named Lila, straight A student, part-time job, single mom, wanted to study engineering. I've always been good at building things, she wrote in her essay, but the world I grew up in wasn't built for girls like me. I want to change that. I saw myself in her, not in the specifics, but in the hunger. We awarded her a full ride. When I called to tell her, her mom sobbed into the phone. I work nights at the hospital, she said. I've been praying for a miracle. I guess God sent you. I didn't know what to say to that. So I said what felt true. It's not a miracle, I said. It's the result of hard work, hers and yours. I'm just redistributing what should have never been hoarded in the first place. The local paper ran a piece on the fund launch with a photo of me standing in front of a mural at one of our partner schools. The headline read, "Teacher turns inheritance into opportunity for hundreds of students." They wanted to focus on the money, on the secret heiress angle, on the salacious fact that I'd spent years living like a normal person. I redirected them every time. This isn't about me being rich, I said during one interview. This is about public schools being underfunded, about kids being told they have to be twice as good to get half as far. If my grandmother's money can level the field even a little bit, that's what matters. They still printed the secret millionaire teacher angle, of course. Big headlines sell. But they also printed the names of our first 30 scholarship recipients. That mattered more. I met Marcus at a community event the foundation sponsored. He was standing near the back of the auditorium, tall and quiet, listening intently as a high school senior talked about wanting to study psychology. Later, I saw him again in the hallway, pinning flyers for his organization, free counseling sessions for teens dealing with anxiety and depression. "You run this?" I asked, gesturing to the logo on the flyer. He smiled. It was a small, genuine thing that reached his eyes and lingered there. "Yeah," he said. "Marcus Hill. I started Thrive Community Wellness 3 years ago." "Naomi," I said, offering my hand. "Brooks." "I know," he said, shaking it. "You're the teacher with the scholarship fund. My kids won't stop talking about you." "Your kids?" "The ones who come to our after-school group," he clarified. "At the center on 12th, half of them applied for your program. They've got big plans." The pride in his voice was so pure it made my chest ache. "They deserve big plans," I said. "They just need someone to believe the plans are possible." His smile widened. "That's what we tell them," he said. "Every week." We ended up talking for an hour in that hallway. About schools, about burnout, about how many adults underestimate kids because they don't understand them. He didn't ask about my money. He didn't make jokes about me only being a teacher. He asked about my kids by name when I mentioned them. When he laughed, it wasn't at me. It was with me. A week later, he emailed, suggesting we grab coffee to talk about collaboration between the fund and his nonprofit. "This is definitely not a date," he wrote, "unless you want it to be, in which case it can very much be a date." I stared at the screen for a long time. Was I ready to date? Did I trust myself to choose better this time? I thought about how it felt to talk to him in that hallway. The absence of performance, the presence of curiosity, I typed back. "I'd like it to be both," I wrote. "Collaboration plus coffee plus potential date." The first time we sat across from each other at the little coffee shop on Pine, I realized something surprising. I wasn't nervous. Not like I'd been with Caleb, that breathless, dizzy excitement that had felt romantic at the time and now looked suspiciously like anxiety. With Marcus, I felt comfortable, seen. He listened more than he talked. When he did talk, it was about his clients, about kids who were caring more than any teenager should. "We started a grief group last year," he said, stirring sugar into his coffee. "I wasn't sure anyone would show up. 5 kids came the first week. Now we've got 20. They sit in a circle and talk about losing people they love. It's the heaviest thing I've ever witnessed and the most hopeful." "Why hopeful?" I asked. "Because they keep coming back," he said. "Even though it hurts. They want to heal. That's hope." He asked about my foundation. Not about the numbers, but about the stories behind them. "Why education?" he asked. "Because it saved me," I said simply. "School was the first place I realized I could be more than what people assumed." My grandmother understood that. She built wealth, but she always said her proudest achievement was the fact that I wanted to learn. "Sounds like she'd get along with my grandma," he said, smiling. By the time we finished our second cup, he reached for his wallet. "Let me," he said. I thought of Caleb, insisting on paying as a way of establishing control. I thought of how different this felt. "You know I can buy the building, right?" I teased lightly. He laughed. "I know, but I asked you out. I get this one. You can get the next 50 if you want." It was a joke, but under it there was no flinch. No discomfort about me having more. Just acceptance. We took things slowly. He met Jade, who grilled him like she was auditioning him for a role he didn't know he'd applied for. "And what do you plan to do if you ever forget how amazing she is?" she asked over dinner one night. Marcus didn't miss a beat. "Go back to therapy," he said, "and get out of her way until I remember." Jade nodded, satisfied. "I like him," she told me later, pretending not to smile. "But I'm still watching." "Good," Marcus said when I told him. "We all need a Jade." Months passed. We partnered on a program that combined scholarships with mental health support, a recognition that money for college meant nothing if a student's brain was on fire. We attended boring nonprofit galas together and made faces at each other from across the room when someone droned on too long about disrupting the education space. He saw me on bad hair days and good, in sweatpants and in the occasional nice dress. He never once made a joke about me only teaching. When people asked him what I did, he said, "She's an educator and a philanthropist. She changes lives." He meant it, and he believed I'd been those things long before the newspaper articles. One night, as we sat on my couch surrounded by scholarship applications, he looked over at me. "Can I ask something?" he said. "Of course." "When you met your ex," he said carefully, "do you think you were hiding who you were because of him or because of you?" The question landed with the strange feeling you get when someone turns on a light in a room you thought was already bright. "Both," I said after a moment. "He benefited from my hiding, but he didn't cause it. I'd been making myself smaller long before he came along. He just fit perfectly into that habit." "And now?" he asked. "Now I'm done shrinking," I said. "Even if it scares people, even if it scares me." He smiled, eyes soft. "Good," he said. "The world needs the full-sized version of you." A year after Caleb walked out of my penthouse with 2 suitcases and his pride in tatters, we hosted the first Odessa, Washington Scholars Reunion. 200 students showed up. Some were still in college. Others had just graduated. They milled around the rented hall, hugging and catching up and swapping horror stories about finals. Lila, our very first recipient, stood nervously at the podium, clutching note cards. I watched from the side, my heart in my throat. "When I got the call about the scholarship," she said into the mic, "I thought it was a prank. We didn't know people like Miss Brooks in my neighborhood. People who had money and chose to share it instead of flex it." Shuriken, people laughed softly. "What I've learned this year," she continued, "is that real wealth isn't about cars or houses. It's about how many lives you can touch, how many doors you can hold open for the people coming behind you. Miss Brooks did that for me, and I plan to do it for someone else one day." The crowd applauded. I blinked hard, trying not to cry in front of 200 teenagers. Marcus slipped his hand into mine. "This is your legacy," he whispered. "Not the apartment, not the trust. This." I thought of Caleb then, briefly. Not with anger, with distance. He'd reached out once, months earlier, with a short email from a new address. Told me he was working at a smaller firm now. Less money, less glamour, more time to think. He said he joined a men's group about ego and masculinity. "I'm trying to become the kind of man who wouldn't need to be dragged to the truth by a subpoena," he wrote. "I don't expect a response. I just wanted you to know I'm not wasting the second chance at self-awareness you forced me to take." I'd archived the email, not out of spite, out of completion. His story would go on. So would mine. They just didn't intersect anymore. Back at the reunion, after the speeches and the photos and the too loud music, I found a quiet corner by the window. The city spread out below, glittering. I thought about the girl I'd been at that first fundraiser, standing awkwardly in a too simple dress, not sure if anyone in the room would take her seriously. I thought about the woman I was now, surrounded by students and colleagues and a partner who saw me clearly and chose me anyway. My phone buzzed with a text from Jade. "Jade, this is wild. Remember when your biggest flex was that sticker chart you made for your third graders?" "Naomi, it's still my biggest flex. These kids just have more expensive stickers." I put my phone away and let myself simply exist in that moment. No pretending, no shrinking, no apologizing. Caleb had once said he couldn't live with a woman who earned less. What he'd meant was he couldn't live with a woman whose power he didn't control. He never imagined the woman he was belittling owned the floor beneath his feet. But the real twist, I realized, wasn't that I'd been secretly wealthy. It was that I'd finally stopped hiding, money or otherwise. I hadn't just kicked him out of an apartment. I'd evicted his voice from my head. My grandmother used to say, "The best revenge isn't breaking them down, baby. It's building yourself up so high their opinion can't reach you." As the sun sank behind the buildings, casting the city in gold, I understood exactly what she meant. Caleb's words, his mockery, his doubts, they were somewhere down there, swallowed by streets and years and other people's noise. Up here in the life I'd chosen and built and claimed, they couldn't touch me anymore. I turned away from the window and back toward the sound of my scholars laughing. My husband, my real partner, caught my eye across the room and smiled. That same steady, gentle smile. I walked toward him, toward them, toward the future we were building. Not because I needed someone on my level, but because I'd finally learned that my level was mine to define, and that living fully, loudly, unapologetically, That was the only revenge worth having.